Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku Wielded One for All Without Limits. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. It was 3 weeks after receiving their acceptance letters that spring arrived, and with it the first day of class at UA High School. Izuku spent his time working out, steadily and slowly increasing the intensity of it as to augment his capabilities with his quirk and manner, which wouldn't make it too hard for him to get used to the gradual increase of speed and strength, and studying all kinds of new subjects, which in combination with his physical training, also slowly increased the amount of Haki energy he had at his disposal, to prolong the time he could keep himself enhanced. Momo was a literal treasure trove when new subjects to study were involved, and she gladly helped him with that. He and Momo also hung out a few times, more to help Momo familiarize herself with the area than anything else, but none of them could deny that they enjoyed each other's company, and at this point, they were just looking for excuses to be with one another, much to their private embarrassment and amusement. Also, Izuku texted Achako regularly, but sadly the opportunity to meet each other in person, since she lived relatively far away, so the opportunity to do it had not come up yet. It was a chore not to start thanking her profusely over texts about what she tried to do to help him, so he settled for teasing her subtly about it, and the fact that it took her 2 days to answer the first text he sent her, in which he started doing that, assured him that she knew that he knew what she did. It amused him that he could almost literally feel her embarrassment through her texts, whenever he made a subtle comment about it. Let it be known that All Might's sadistic and messed up sense of humor was starting to take root within Izuku without him being aware of it. Another thing that he spent his time on during the waiting period between receiving the acceptance letter and the first day of class was costume ideas. Much to his frustration, he couldn't really come up with something that complemented or augmented the capabilities of his quirk. Neither King's Will nor passive mantra could be augmented because of how they worked, and active mantra at this point grew according to the amount of Haki energy he had at his disposal. Armament could be enhanced upon itself by putting more Haki energy into it, and the less said about one for all the better. Instead, he decided for a costume design that would increase the damage he could dish out without using his quirks, which would only increase when he did enhance himself with his quirks. Looking at himself in the full body size mirror that was on the living room, Izuku nodded as he adjusted the wireless green and red headphones that were around his neck. Those had been a congratulations gift from his mother for getting accepted by UA, and Izuku wondered if she picked them up specifically because they went well with his uniform and the highlights of his hair. The uniform consisted of a light gray suit over a white dress shirt and dark green dress pants, along with a red necktie. On his feet he was wearing red and gray tennis shoes that reached above of his ankles, but this fact was hidden by his pants. Deciding that he looked decent enough, Izuku picked up his green backpack and strapped it to his shoulders, so it rested comfortably against his back. "I'm heading off now, Mom," he called as he walked towards the door. "Izuku," his mother called to him as he grabbed the doorknob and used it to open the door. He looked back at her curiously as he held the door open, green eyes blinking as he waited for what she had to say. "I'm super proud of you. Just keep doing what you always do, and that's never going to change, you know that, right? Now, go on and give them hell, honey," she beamed at him, raising her right fist to air, and cupping her bicep with her left hand as she grinned. Flushing with happiness, Izuku nodded eagerly at his mother. "You're damn right I will," he declared before he waved at her and stepped out of the house, closing the door behind him. When that happened, Inko's proud grin turned into one of juvenile eagerness as she squealed, jumping rapidly in place. "And make sure to secure a lot of future grandbabies for me to spoil rotten. Kai ha 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 ha." Outside, Izuku shuddered in terror as he finished adjusting his headphones and setting them up to get them connected via Bluetooth with his phone. He decided to ignore the sudden and unexpected feeling of dread that ran down his spine, and selected the random setting of his playlist of preferred songs, and pocketed his phone. Closing his eyes, he breathed out and began to make his way towards the station, which was almost half an hour away from where he lived if you walked at a sedate pace. Izuku wasn't one to rush things, so he had gotten up really early enough to perform his morning run, eat breakfast, shower and get ready 1.5 hours before classes started at 8 a.m. With his eyes still closed, Izuku sat calm-paced towards the station, not opening his eyes as he walked, which drew curious and amused looks from those that caught on to that fact. They were probably wondering if the tall teen was wishing to smack into something. None of them knew, of course, about the mantra aspect of his quirk, which albeit reduced to 60% of its passive capabilities, thanks to him having his eyes closed and his ears covered along with listening to music, he was still allowed a range of perception of 60 feet, more than enough to avoid running into something or someone, and not get lost on his way to his destination. Izuku eventually reached the station, and as he went down the stairs he smiled as a familiar presence entered his field of passive perception. Punctual as always, he thought with some fondness as he walked towards the boarding platform of the train that was going to take to the station nearest to UA. When he finally arrived, his smile widened when he saw Momo reclining against a pillar with her surprisingly girly school suitcase, which she held in front of her with her two hands. She looks good in her uniform. That's not surprising though, he thought immediately after taking in her appearance, blushing in embarrassment as he realized what he just thought. Damn it. Mind out of the gutter, Midoriya. It's not even 7 in the morning, for all might's sake. Control yourself. After a few seconds of trying, and somewhat succeeding, of controlling his blush, Izuku put a smile on his face as he raised his hand in wave. Momo-chan. Good morning. An automatic smile appeared on Momo's face at the sound of his voice, and she turned towards him, only to blush slightly as she took in his appearance. It embarrassed her to admit that while his uniform hid the tone of his muscles to her displeasure, it still was fit perfectly for him, and wore correctly too, meaning that his overall musculature was still visible, which pleased her. Momo likes very much, she thought to herself, but like all girls, she didn't show her thoughts on her face, as she instead smiled prettily at him as she waved back. Good morning to you too, Izuku-kun. Did you wait here for long? He asked her once he approached her. Momo shook her head. Not really. I've been for about 5 minutes or so. I am, however, surprised that you didn't beat me here. Did you even sleep at all? She teased him, knowing full well that the past few days Izuku had been a literal ball of excitement due to the upcoming start of their first year at UA. Izuku blushed a bit, knowing exactly what she was talking about, and found himself unwilling to look at her, also knowing that the amused expressing that she was sure to have was only going to embarrass him even more. I refuse to deign such a claim with a comeback, he said with mock indignation, his lips twitching upwards. Momo just shook her head and laughed. Izuku joined her after a few moments. When they finally calmed down, Izuku and Momo began to talk in earnest about UA, and what they were expecting to learn and such. They of course did that a healthy amount of times while they waited for this day, but there had been an unspoken agreement to not get overboard, so as not to get so excited that thinking about it was the only thing they could do effectively. Today those shackles were off, and Izuku and Momo found themselves chattering away animatedly, not even noticing when their train arrived. They got in and took their seats almost as an afterthought. Thankfully, they did notice when it was time to get off from the train at their station, and they did so after a second of awkwardly looking away from each other, and then laughing about it. Since they were in no hurry, they calmly walked in direction of the UA facilities as they continued their talk, this time around putting less focus into it, so as not to get as distracted as a few minutes ago. They eventually reached the facilities and even thought they both had seen the impressive fence and gate, and the 4 buildings that worked as the main facility for the school. They were still in awe at the sight. At least we aren't the only ones, commented Momo idly as she looked at other students that looked their age, who were also staring up at everything in shock and awe, even as they continued to walk into the school grounds. Older students were looking at them knowingly, others outright laughing, as they also made their way in. That would have been a bit embarrassing, yes, agreed Izuku as they passed the doors, sighing a bit in relief as he did so. They had been warned on the fact that should they not carry their student IDs, the doors would close on them and prevent them from entering. He had put his inside his backpack in one of those pockets that you thought were useless because of where they were, and how small they were. He had done that in order to make sure he always had it on his person whenever he went to school. Even knowing that, he was still expecting for the doors to close on him. Nervousness and excitement mixed together tended to do that to people. Do you know where our classroom is? He asked her as they went into the building that was on the left and in the front. Since it was called Building 1, and that other students their age were also going into that building, they deduced that their classroom was there. Last floor, answered Momo after a second of thought. Each building has 15 floors, and each department has a number of floors dedicated to it, depending on their needs. For example, the Department of Support has 3 floors dedicated to it, due to the number of tools and equipment they need for their courses. We of the course of heroics only have the last and second to last floors dedicated to us, since we only use them for theoretical classes, and the rest of the time is spent on the school training grounds, learning how to use our quirks effectively in preparation for the time we become heroes. As they got into the elevator, which for some reason was only occupied by them at the moment, Izuku nodded in understanding. That makes sense, he said with a smile. That quickly slipped of his face as he groaned. Ugh. It was a given he was going to pass, I guess, but why did he have to be in the same class as me, he muttered, but Momo still heard him. She cocked her head curiously. Who? Izuku frowned as the elevator came to a stop and its door opened. A guy from my middle school. We used to be friends, at least from my perspective. Then his quirk manifested, and long story short he turned into a very unpleasant person. So much that for a moment I thought he was going to become a villain, which would have been very, very bad, since his quirk is one of the most powerful I have seen. Say whatever you want about Katsuki Bakugo, but his quirk was scary strong. Thankfully, he's got his sight on becoming the best hero there is, so I doubt that's going to happen. He's very stubborn. Dealing with him can get very annoying, very quickly. Momo met in understanding. Ah, I get it. And she did. She herself had to deal with people that thought they were entitled to everything, just because of how strong their quirks were, and unless you showed them what was what with your own quirk, which in their mind was obviously weaker than theirs, they were going to continue to harass you, as long as you had to interact with them on a regular basis. Let's just try our best to ignore him if he gets out of hand, yes. Besides, I doubt the teachers will allow that kind of behavior in a school as prestigious as this one is. Izuku nodded. I hope so. They eventually reached the door to their classroom, which was more than 3 times Izuku's height, and had 1A paint across its length vertically, with the hole in the letter A serving as a small window to look into the classroom. Even though he couldn't hear what was going on inside, probably because the room was for some reason sound isolated, he could still perceive that there was a commotion inside, and that Katsuki was involved. Izuku opened the door, and his expression turned so flat that he almost looked dead. Momo peered in curiously from over his shoulder. Don't put your legs on the desk. Don't think that's disrespectful towards your classmates. No, as a matter of fact, I don't think so. Which middle school are you from anyway, you good-for-nothing fodder? The one that spoke first, the guy that was almost robotic and raised the issue of there being 4 villains in the handout they were given on the day of entrance examination, promptly answered. A private SCHM. I'm from Samei Junior High School. My name is Tenya Ida. Samei, huh? Replied Katsuki as he leaned forward, a sadistic leer on his face as he grinned. Well, aren't you a fucking elite? Seems I've got a reason to fucking kill you until you die after all. A reason to kill me until I die. What the hell? Tenya flinched back, and he had a horrified look on his face as he looked at Katsuki. What nerve? You want to be a hero? Momo, her expression now as flat as Izuku's, shook her head in disbelief after watching the short exchange. I can see what you meant earlier, she said, thinking back to those that believed themselves to be better than others because of their quirks. With that short exchange she saw what kind of person Katsuki was, and she knew that he was going to be worse than those she used to have to deal with, if he wasn't put in his place. Izuku just sighed tiredly. Tenya, who caught that the door was open from the corner of his eyes, saw him and immediately moved towards him in a robotic fashion. Hello. My name is Tenya Ida from Samei. Yeah. I overheard you from when you were dealing with Bakugo, said Izuku with a smile as he extended his hand towards him. He's still as uptight and stiff as he was during the entrance examination, he thought as he shook his hand. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I believe we met each other briefly before the practical test, yes? Now that he was paying a bit more of attention, Izuku noticed the blonde-haired pretty boy that had been wearing a belt with a jewel was also there, along with the kid with a thick muscular tail. Tenya nodded. Yes, we did. You were pretty much unassuming, and the only thing of note back then was the fact that you didn't arrive with your school uniform and your impressive physique, but rest assured that you made quite the impression afterwards, he said, a bit dryly after he recalled the first 20 seconds of the exams, and then when he destroyed the trap villain with a single punch, after moving as fast as he had seen his brother move when going all out. He then noticed as Momo stepped aside from behind Izuku and bowed to her a bit at the waist. Hello there. My name is Tenya Ida. I'm from. Momo's lips twitched in amusement. I also overheard you, Ida-kun. My name is Momoyo Irozu. Nice to meet you, she said, extending her hand and unknowingly thinking the same as Izuku as she noticed that his movements were very stiff. She wondered if he also moved like this when he was using his quirk or otherwise fighting. She sincerely hoped no, otherwise, he was never going to win a fight. Likewise, he said to her before he turned towards Izuku, a serious expression on his face. I have to hand it to you, Midoriya. You figured out the truth behind the practical exam, didn't you? It was the reason why you went and destroyed the trap villain without hesitation to save that girl, right? He asked, having himself figured that UA was not going to let go someone with a powerful quirk as Izuku's. I was completely blind to it until after the fact. I hate to admit it, but you were the better out of the two of us. Izuku blinked before he shook his head. Not really. I didn't find out about it until the next day when Momo-chan had to almost walk me through the explanation why the trap villain wasn't what it seemed. I just saw that a Chako-chan about to get hurt, and someone's safety is more important than being accepted to this school. Still, I'm glad it turned out to be a scam, he said with a laugh. The others in the classroom heard this, and they turned towards Izuku with wide eyes, the only exceptions being those that already knew what happened, Momo, and those that saw him do it, the blonde pretty boy and the blonde kid with the tail. Still, the only one not wondering about the type of quirk he had, and how strong it had to be to allow him to destroy something that big and powerful was Momo. All of them had seen the trap villain after all. And there was also the fact that he had seemingly jumped in to save someone from being killed by the monster's fourth villain, disregarding the amount of points he had earned up to that point, which were likely not an insignificant amount, considering that his quirk was apparently powerful enough to destroy said trap villain. Everyone there, with a few notable exceptions, was looking forward to getting to know the curly-haired teen better. Katsuki's shocked expression turned into one of anger and loathing as he glared at Izuku, snarling as smoke began to slowly trail up from his palm. That fucking nerd. He thought to himself as he recalled the only interaction they had in the time period between the examination entrance and today. They had gone to Ordera in order to sort out their paperwork for their transfer to UA, and he had confronted him, after the teacher praised them for not only passing the test, but also getting first and second place too. He had been livid when he found out that Izuku had gotten first place, and he didn't even wait to learn the margin between their scores before he confronted him. Only a few insults, curse words and threats, had left his mouth before Izuku had shot him up with a glare that for some reason forced him to step back. Not only that, but he had shuddered in fright for the second time because of him. After that, Katsuki had finally accepted that Izuku had a quirk, a strong one, but there was a wide gap between that, and admitting that Izuku's quirk was stronger than his. That was simply unacceptable. I'm going to make you fucking die the first chance I get, Deku. Back with Izuku, he was idly chatting with Momo and Tenya. The latter he was somewhat surprised to find that he was pleasant to talk to despite his stiffness, when he suddenly perked up, and he turned towards Momo with a knowing smile on his face. Momo looked back at him with a confused frown before she got it, and she also perked up, a similar expression appearing on her face. Tenya, who had been about to speak, looked on confused. A few moments later, the door to the classroom was opened, and Ichako appeared, an excited smile on her face as she almost frolicked into the classroom. She froze mid-jump, however, when she saw Izuku. At first, she just blushed as she looked at him before, with a grin, she made a beeline towards the green-haired teen. Deku-kun. She shouted in delight before she promptly glomped him, wrapping her arms around his midsection. Izuku blushed, having caught how good she looked in her uniform, and now feeling her body pressing against his as she hugged him, before he shook his head, got control of himself, laughed and shot Momo a smug look as he hugged Ichako back. It's good to see you again, Ichako-chan. Momo rolled her eyes as she stepped forward and tapped a happy Ichako on the shoulder, getting her attention. Hello. My name is Momo Yorozu. I am good friend of Izuku. He spoke a lot about you and... She trailed off as she smiled tenderly at Ichako as she stepped back from Izuku's embrace, blushing as she realized her actions and turned even more red when she caught the expression on Momo's face. He told me what you tried to do after the exams were finished and thought you costed him his chance to get in. You don't know how much that meant to him. Ichako's entire face turned red as Momo moved in to give her a hug, and she turned towards Izuku only averted her eyes with flushed cheeks at the soft expression on his face. After a moment, Ichako relaxed and she eagerly returned Momo's hug. It's nice to meet you too, Yorozu-san. And what I did for the Deku-kun, I only did it because it was the right thing to do after he lost his points because of me, she said, her voice still a bit regretful. Nonsense, declared Momo as she ended the hug and held Ichako by her shoulders. It was not your fault, Ichako-chan, so stop blaming yourself for something that didn't happen. As a matter of fact, it was actually the contrary that happened. You helped Izuku-kun get more points, said Momo with confidence as she smiled at the brown-haired girl. Izuku opened his mouth, closed it, grasped his chin, thought about it, and then nodded with a shrug. She does have a point. Iida nodded stiffly. Indeed. Ichako's eyes whitened as she realized this. That's right. She then turned towards Izuku and pointed at him with a mischievous glint in her eyes. Then, that means you owe me, Deku-kun. Izuku raised an amused eyebrow. Is that so? Then what do you? Izuku trailed off as out of the sudden a presence appeared 75 feet within his passive range of mental perception, and his eyes widened. How in the hell did I miss someone entering my range? Not even All Might can accomplish that. Who the hell is this? Thought Izuku furiously as he stared at the door. Momo, Ichako and Iida looked at him in confusion, thought it seemed like Momo had an inkling of what might have happened, as she knew about the capabilities of Haki. That was when the door to the classroom opened and a black-haired man with bloodshot half-lidded eyes and encased within a yellow sleeping bag was revealed. If you are going to be hunting for buddies, do it elsewhere, he said, his voice bored as he pulled out a juice pouch. This is the department. He put the pouch on his mouth and sucked it epically in one go. Of heroics. Izuku stared at him as he went to take a seat. The unwashed man gave him a sense of familiarity, but he couldn't quite place it. Who the hell is this guy? He thought, and he exchanged glances with Momo and Ichako, who shrugged helplessly as they shook their heads. They also didn't know who this was. The man shrugged off the sleeping bag and revealed his black long-sleeved shirt, utility belt and black pants tucked into his boots. He also had a strange scarf wrapped many times around his neck, which resulted in it covering part of his upper chest and lower face as well. He stood in front of every slouched a bit as he looked almost ready to fall asleep. The sense of familiarity increased for Izuku, but he still couldn't place him. It took you lot 8 seconds to settle down. Life is short, kids. You are all lacking in common sense. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Huh. That, and annoyed incredulity, was the general response from the classroom to his words. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoda. Pleasure meeting you, he said, his tone and expression not matching his words at all, with only further to annoy and weird out the students. He then reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out blue and white tracksuit. The reason why he would have such a thing inside a sleeping bag would remain unanswered indefinitely. Wear these. Immediately. And then shove off to the PE grounds. All Might was sitting on his new office going through the files of the members of Class 1A, which was the class to which Izuku was assigned and a class that he was going to be teaching foundational heroes studies, and he perked as he remembered one tiny detail about the first day at UA. I totally forgot how unforgiving UA's system is. Depending on their homeroom teacher, they might be expelled before the day is even over. Who's their homeroom teacher anyways? He thought before he went and checked the first pages of his documents. After a few moments, Toshinori sighed as he put down the documents and pinched the bridge of his nose. They got Aizawa. They are in for a very rude awakening. He paused for a moment and frowned. I hope he doesn't force young Midoriya-kun to use his current 100%. The Quirk assessment test? Asked Izuku curiously as he leisurely stretched his body. He, Momo, Ichako, Tenya, the rest of the class and Aizawa were at the PE grounds. They were massive and possessed many terrains to practice different sports. But what about the initiation ceremony? Or the guidance counselor meeting? Loli asked Ichako, her face flushing a bit as she took many discreet glances at Izuku, who kept on stretching without seemingly a care in the world. She wasn't the only one as Momo too was in that predicament. Much to her amusement and slight annoyance, she noticed that all the girls were sending discreet glances his ways with a tint of pink on their cheeks. She knew that Izuku had easily the best physique out of all the boys there, and she couldn't blame the hormonal teenage girls from being interested. But if they reacted this way when they saw him wearing the tracksuit, she wondered how they would react when they saw him in his hero costume. The thought made her giggle in amusement. If you want to be heroes, we don't have time for such frivolities, said Aizawa somewhat harshly before he turned to look at them all from over his shoulder, his bloodshot half-lidded eyes seemingly menacing as he stared at them. You all understand that UA has a reputation for the amount of freedom that is given on campus. Well, that freedom also go for us teachers, too, he said, and his tone was enough to send a shiver down everyone's spines. Softball pitch. Standing long jump. 50-meter dash. Endurance running. Grip strength. Sustained sideways jump. Upper body exercise. Seated toe touch. These are all activities you know from middle school, naturally. Physical tests in which were prohibited from using your quirks. The country hasn't gotten around standardizing those sorts of records or keeping track of average performance levels. That's one of the shortcomings of the MECSST, Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology. Aizawa paused to make sure that everyone was paying attention. When he confirmed that, he pulled out a tablet that was linked up to the school system. Midoriya. How far you could throw a softball in middle school? Izuku shrugged. 96 meters. Aizawa nodded and pulled out a softball as he motioned Izuku to take a place inside the throwing circle. He lobbed the ball at him when Izuku did as told. Try using your quirk this time around. As long as you don't exit the circle, anything you do is fine. Don't hold back, he said somewhat pointedly at the end. Izuku turned sharply towards him, and he hoped that his question was correctly interpreted by Aizawa. He was asking, are you sure you don't want me to hold back? It seemed like it did, for Aizawa merely nodded his head in reassurance. Izuku sighed and nodded his head in acceptance. It seemed like his homeroom teacher had seen him destroy the trap villain, meaning that he couldn't get away with only using armament Haki at its utmost output, for only a fool would believe that he could do what he did with that amount of power. He took solace on the fact that there was no way Aizawa knew that it was one for all. He could easily pass it up as increasing his level of physical enhancement with his own quirk. Which wasn't exactly a lie, but not the entire truth either. Here I go then, muttered Izuku as the shiny blackness of armament covered his right arm completely, though it only could be seen up to halfway up his bicep, since the rest was covered by the sleeve of his tracksuit. That black thing on his arm looks pretty cool. What is that? Commented a spiky red-haired boy as he looked at Izuku intently. That's the armament aspect of Izuku-kun's quirk. By manipulating a special energy within his body, he can increase his strength, speed and durability many times over, depending the amount of energy he uses, explained Momo with a small smile as she also looked at the young man. Wait, you said aspect. Does that mean that he can do more than one thing with his quirk? Questioned a short girl with green hair and facial features that vaguely resembled a frog, but for some reason, she was still very cute as she held one of her slightly oversized fingers to her cheek. Momo nodded. Yes. With this energy, Izuku-kun can also sense pretty much everything around him, as long as he is paying attention, and he can project it outwards to intimidate his foes. His quirk is called Haki, Ambition, and it is very powerful. Easily one of the strongest I have personally seen, she admitted, crossing her arms under her developed bust. Katsuki's eyebrow twitched, and he looked ready to blow a fuse as he heard this. Then, when everyone thought that Izuku was going to throw the ball, they were further surprised when red veins of energy began to run through his arm, as the black coloration of his arm took in a silvery hue. Not only that, but greenish-blue arcs of lighting began to trail down his arm, as the subtle smell of burn ozone was perceived by Aizawa. And that was when finally, Izuku threw the softball. The air was displaced with a shockwave, and a massive amount of dust was kicked up, making everyone there cover their eyes with their arms to protect them. When everything settled back after a few moments, they looked up and all of their eyes widened when they saw Izuku standing still within the circle, the earth a bit cracked around him as he held up his smoking arm. Ichako idly noticed that it wasn't shaking this time around. Aizawa-sensei, began to say Izuku as he tightened his fist. That was when his tablet beeped and Aizawa looked down to see the results. His eyes widened. 2043.8 MTS. He looked towards Midoriya, and when he saw the fierce expression on Izuku's face, he couldn't help the excited and eager, grinning expression that appeared on his own. If you still want for UA to have usable PE grounds by the time we finish, I suggest you allow me to hold back a little, yes? This kid, muttered Aizawa. Toshinori perked up as he heard the somewhat muffled sonic boom coming from outside. He sighed as he began to rub his eyebrows with his thumb, index finger and middle finger in exasperation. I'll make they take the damage out of your pay, Aizawa. Awesome. That looks so fun. Declared a pink-skinned and pink-haired girl with small horn protruding from her head with an excited grin on her pretty face. Her black and yellow eyes were gleaming with awe as she looked at Izuku. 2044 meters. What in the actual fuck? Muttered the same red-haired boy again with disbelief as he also stared at Izuku with wide eyes. And he doesn't even look tired. Did he really one-shoot the trap villain during the entrance examination? Ichako wasn't really surprised as she had already seen, from the front row one might add, how strong Izuku really was, so, from her perspective, seeing him throw a ball more than 2 kilometers away, and the UAPE grounds had more than enough space that it easily allowed for the softball throw ground to accommodate that, and more, was not something out of this world. Instead, with an embarrassed blush, Ichako focused more on how cool he looked right now. Yep. Girl had it bad. Momo, on the other hand, was surprised. I didn't know he could enhance himself to be that strong. He never really went into details, though. She trailed off as she looked at him as he locked gazes with their teacher, unwilling to back down. Without her knowledge, a slight blush appeared on her cheeks. Midoriya Izuku. Thought a short-haired boy, one side of it being white and the other red. He had a burned scar on the upper left side of his face, his eye of that side possessing a turquoise color, while the other was gray-colored. His left fist tightened as he stared hard at Izuku, his eyes narrowed. I'll be keeping an eye on him. Meanwhile, Katsuki could only stare in disbelief. What the? Ever since Izuku had saved him, Katsuki had known that his quirk was very strong, but he had certainly not been expecting this. Even though the vein like thingies and electricity was new, because he didn't remember any of that when he saw Izuku use his quirk for the first and last time before today, he could tell that all of it was Izuku's strength. He scowled as he gritted his teeth and tightened his slowly smoking fists. That asshole. He held back at that time and wants to hold back now. Is he fucking mocking me? I'll fucking kill him. After a subtle nod, quickly deducing by Izuku's display that he could easily destroy the grounds if he were to go all out, Aizawa finally turned his attention away from Izuku, after schooling his features into an intimidating expression. It looks fun, you say? He whispered menacingly as he turned to glare at all of them, his half-lidded bloodshot eyes only adding to the image. So, you were planning to spend 3 years here having a good old time. What happened to becoming heroes? More than one shivered in fright at the tone of Aizawa's voice, as he pinned each and everyone in place with his gaze. Only a few, such as Katsuki, Ida, Momo, the blue-haired boy, the red-haired one, the girl with frog-like features and even Ichako, managing to hold his gaze without flinching or trembling in place. Alright then. Since that's how it is, I've got a new rule. The student who ranks last in total points will be judged as hopeless and will be instantly expelled. Izuku, having come back to stand next to the group, raised an eyebrow at him, not forgetting what happened with him during the entrance examination. Can he even do that? He turned towards Momo, his expression obvious as to what he was asking. When she rolled her eyes and shook her head in the negative, he nodded at her with a smile, which she returned almost instantly. Izuku blushed a bit and shook his head to get rid of the distracting thoughts concerning Momo's prettiness. Alright. Let's just hope no one. He turned towards his classmates and sweat dropped when he saw the horrified, determined, uncertain, despairing expression on most of their faces. Never mind. Menacing expression turning into one of sadistic glee, Aizawa regarded them all. Our freedom means we dispense as students as we please. Welcome. He trailed off as he grinned and pushed a bit of his hair back, so his students could see his almost mocking expression. To the Department of Heroics. The one who ranks last gets expelled. An extremely short boy with a big head and a hair that resembled grapes exclaimed, his skin pale, sweating and his entire body sweating as he bit at his nails at a rapid pace. This is our first day here, declared Ichako with some protest in her voice. But even if it weren't, that's just too unreasonable. Aizawa raised an eyebrow at her. Natural disasters, massive accidents, ego-mad villains. All kind of calamities can happen when we least expect them. Japan is now positively up to the neck and unreasonable. And it's our jobs as heroes to reserve it all and restore reason. His gaze hardened, and he turned to address everyone after he saw that she understood his point. If you were counting on a friendly chat at the local McDonald's after school, that's too bad. From now on, for the next 3 years, all you can expect from your life at UA is one hardship after the next. He stopped ominously only to smile almost gently as he pointed a finger to the sky. This is plus ultra. I expect you to overcome these trails and climb to the top. The unexpected encouraging words from Aizawa seemed to do the trick as everyone, except for the short boy with grapes for hair, got a determined look on their faces, as they nodded their heads at their teacher with newfound resolution. The Ida narrowed his eyes and clenched the bottle of water he was holding. The pressure is on. So this is UA's baptism, huh? The pinnacle of hero training. No choice but to give it my all. Katsuki grinned dangerously as he grabbed his shoulder and began to spin his arm in a warm-up exercise, as he glared at Izuku. It doesn't matter how strong your quirk is, Deku. I'll show you that I am the best between us. That was the sound that came from Ichako's mouth as she clenched her fists and maintained her expression of determination. Aizawa smirked, seeing everyone pumped up for the upcoming trails. Now then, that was the demonstration. Time to kick it up a notch, yes. And thus, the tests began. The first test was the 50-meter dash. During this trail, Iida demonstrated that he was right on his element as he used his Quirk engine, which was exactly like it sounded as it gave him engines for legs that were located at calf level. He finished the dash in 3.04 seconds. Asuitsuyu, with her frog form Quirk, finished the dash in 5.58 seconds, showing that while she wasn't extremely fast, her Quirk gave her certain advantages when applied correctly. Ichako, using her Quirk's zero gravity to make her shoes and clothes weigh nothing, managed to reduce some time from her previous record, but she was still within what a normal human with physical training could achieve, as her speed wasn't enhanced. Her time was 7.15 seconds. Yuga Aoyama, the pretty blonde boy, used his Quirk naval laser to propel himself backwards in direction of the finishing line, managing a time of 5.51 seconds, despite falling to the ground when he reached his limit of continuous firing the laser from high naval. Mina Ashido, the pink-haired and pink-skinned girls with black and yellow eyes and horns, finished in 5.26 seconds, showing that her physical attributes were on par with Tsuyu's, despite her Quirk being acid. Momo also showed that she had a very well-conditioned body, when she finished the race dash in 6.24, only using her Quirk to create a pair of sneakers that had special spikes on the sole that allowed for a better grip of the soil when running. When it came time for Izuku and Katsuki to make the dash, coincidentally against each other, the Explosion Quirk user used the namesake of his Quirk to propel himself forwards, while Izuku enhanced all the muscles in his body that participated in the action of running with armament at his current outmost output, without enhancing it with one for all. Izuku ended winning the race as he finished in 2.91 seconds, even faster than Tenya, while Bakugo finished in 3.93 seconds, much to the latter's ire. Then it was the grip strength test, where only Meizo Shoji, with his Dupli Arms Quirk, Rakido Sato with his Sugar Rush Quirk and Izuku, with armament enhancement, got extreme results. Sato got 312 kgs, after eating a bit of sugar, followed then by Shoji, who got 540 kgs, and then Izuku, who got 631 kgs. Then, it was followed by the standing long jump, in which the ones that excelled were Tsuyu, Aoyama and Tsuyu. After that, it was the sustained sideways jump, in which Mineta, the great for hair short kid, excelled thanks to the bouncy properties of his pop-off Quirk. Then they were back to the softball pitch trail, and Izuku was amused when Ichako's result turned out to be infinite, when she used her Quirk to negate the effects of gravity on the ball before she threw it, and he was impressed, but not surprised, when Momo created a small cannon for the softball, which was within the rules as she could, in Aizawa's own words, do whatever she wanted as long as she didn't leave the circle. Her softball almost reached a kilometer. He didn't have to throw a softball again, since Aizawa decided to use his first throw as his result in that trail. After that, all the trails continued until they were finished. Time to present the results, said Aizawa as he stood in front of the students, all of them in different states of tiredness, with the exception of Izuku, who wasn't even sweating, much to the shock of those that were perceptive enough to notice the fact, even when he had been accomplishing inhuman feats one after the other. It was honestly terrifying. The total is the simply aggregate sum of each of your scores. If I recited all of your scores, it would take more time than we have, so I'll disclose them all at once. Everyone tense as Aizawa lifted up his hand holding a remote control, and pointed it at a screen. Who would be expelled would be revealed now. Then, with a bored expression, Aizawa spoke again. Oh, yeah. That whole expulsion thing. It was a lie, by the way. You could hear a pin drop thanks to the silence that followed as everyone, except for Momo and Izuku, stared at Aizawa in dumbfounded confusion and shock. Huh. Was what came of all of their mouths, Achako's eyes even going comically white as her fists hung limply in front of her. Aizawa grinned in amused glee as he stared at them with sadistic eyes. It was a logical ruse to pull out your best performances. It is known that humans perform their best when they perceive that there is something valuable at stake after all. Izuku snickered while Momo rolled her eyes at the following outraged outburst of the others, all of whom looked ready to murder the gleeful Aizawa. Come on guys. Use your brains and think logically. Of course it was a lie, she told them with some exasperation as she shook her head. Aizawa then turned around and began to make his way back into the main building. And, right. Yep. With that, it's over. Your curriculum sheets are back in the classroom, so give them a once-over. And don't relax too much. If you think today was absurd and unreasonable, your eyeballs will doubtless pop out of their sockets at tomorrow's ordeal, he said before he nonchalantly pressed a button on the remote, and the screen came to live, showing each one placement and their scores. 1 Izuku Midoriya. 2 Momo Yaoyorozu. 3 Shoto Todoroki. 4 Katsuki Bakugo. 5 Tenya Iida. 6 Yumikage Tokoyami. 7 Meizo Shoji. 8 Masahiro Ojiro. 9 Ijiro Kirishima. 10 Mina Ashido. 11 Ichako Uraka. 12 Koji Koda. 13 Sato Rakido. 14 Tsuyu Asui. 15 Yuga Aoyama. 16 Sero Hanta. 17 Denki Kaminari. 18 Kyoka Jiro. 19 Toru Higakure. 20 Minoru Mineta. No one there was surprised by the fact that Izuku got first place, but what was surprising was the gap between his score and that of the second place, Momo's, because it was extremely big. Well, he was being congratulated by the others, except for Mineta, who had passed out after finding that he was on last place, and feeling extremely amount of relief when it turned out that he was not going to be expelled, and 2 others. Katsuki was glaring daggers at him and Momo. 4th fucking place. I can understand Deku getting first place because of that ridiculous quirk of his, but just how did that bitch get second place? Gah. He then turned towards the blue-haired boy who was standing next to him, and was also looking at Izuku. And who the fuck is this guy? Shoto Todoroki. He looks familiar for some reason, but I can't place where I've seen him before. How the fuck did he get 3rd place anyway? Meanwhile, Shoto looked at Izuku with narrowed eyes. They widened a bit when he felt his left side started to heat up, while his right side began to get cold. Scowling, he crossed his arms and focused on raining on his quirks, successfully doing so after a few moments. He turned his eyes back to Izuku, who was embarrassedly laughing while he watched as Ichako was reenacting his feats, while narrating with an over-the-top voice, the others laughing in amusement. Slowly, an excited smirk appeared on Shoto's face as he narrowed his eyes at Izuku. Midoriya. How interesting. Aizawa, you liar. That was the epic reading he got when he turned around a corner, and he found himself face to face with the current #1 hero. Aizawa just looked on board. Oh, it's you, All Might. Were you watching? That means you must be free, right? All Might ignored him. A logical ruse. I didn't think you were capable of practical jokes. You did expel an entire class of 1st graders last year. You kick kids out without a moment's hesitation if you judge them as having 0 chances. This is a total 180 from what you used to always say. Could it be because? All Might's grin turned even more epic as he leaned a beat towards Aizawa and pointed at him with his hand as if it was a gun. That you felt it, too? Young Midoriya's raw potential. You felt it, too? Huh? Aizawa questioned rhetorically, making All Might realize his folly as he began to mentally sweat. Aizawa turned towards him with an uncaring expression on his face. So, you know him, then? I knew that he reminded me of you for some reason. Your penchant for over-the-top performances must have rubbed in on him. All Might grinned. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment, he deadpanned before sighing and shrugging. I'm gonna go on a limb and say that you had a hand in training him. He is too similar to you for that not to be the case. As such, it should be obvious that by this point he already has the physical capabilities to become a pro hero, but his age, along with his lack of experience and maturity, get in the way of that. Besides that, everyone in that class have chances above 0. I can kick out anyone whose chances drop below that mark at any time. It's not a cruel thing to end the half-assed chase of a dream, is it? As analytical and logical as ever, eh? And your brand of kindness, he thought, mentally nervous at how close Aizawa had gotten to the actual truth. He was going to have to talk with Izuku about this. They needed to be more careful, just in case. Instead, he put a fist on his waist and wiggled a finger in Aizawa's direction. Just as I thought. You and I will never get along. Aizawa just shrugged before he continued to walk away, hands in his pockets and posture slouched. At the end of the day, Izuku along with Momo, Ichako and Tenya, were heading out of the UA grounds. They 4 of them were headed towards the same train station, so it was only logical that they took their trip together. I have to say, Aizawa-sensei really got me. I'd actually thought so this is how the highest academia for hero is like. Now I see how a teacher can encourage deception, said Tenya, grasping his chin with his index finger and thumb, as he nodded his head repeatedly. Izuku chuckled. I thought he was stiff, but he's just diligent and honest. Shaking his head, Izuku addressed him. I learned my lesson from the entrance examination. Unless proven otherwise, anything that comes from the mouth of heroes directly related to UA is bullshit until proven otherwise. Ichako nodded her head in agreement. I agree. They have tricked us twice already, and the first day of class just barely ended. Momo, nodding thoughtfully, added. So, Do we believe Aizawa-sensei when he warned us about tomorrow's trails being even more difficult than today's, and do what we can to prepare for any possibility we can think of, or we just wait for tomorrow and see? Izuku shook his head. By that logic, tomorrow should be a completely normal day. But, we have Foundational Heroes Studies class tomorrow, and All Might is the teacher. I happen to have interacted with him a few times in the past directly, and if there is one thing I'm sure of is that nothing is normal with that guy. Tenya stopped and looked at Izuku with wide eyes. You have interacted with All Might more than once. How did that happen? Momo and Ichako weren't surprised, as they already knew that All Might had trained Izuku. What they didn't know was the actual context and extent of that training. He and All Might had deduced that if people thought that All Might had given Izuku some training and weren't afraid to admit it, that they wouldn't look too much into it, as it wouldn't seem like they were hiding something. It was a lie within a truth. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. You remember that incident between him and the sludge villain about 10 months ago? Well, he ended up witnessing how I saved Bakugo from it using the armament aspect of my quirk, and he said that it was similar to his own quirk, which he refused to elaborate on. Might I add. Said he wanted to keep the people speculating, the secretive bastard. Anyways, so he wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing, and gave me a few pointers on how to control it and train it. Tenya looked very impressed, so much that he outright saluted him. Your luck is out of this world, Midoriya. Izuku's sweat dropped. You are impressed by my luck? What the heck, dude? Ichako gave Izuku a curious look. What do you think All Might is going to have us do, Deku-kun? As the others regarded him with curious looks, Izuku sighed and rubbed the back of his neck before pinching the bridge of his nose. Well, if there is one thing I know is that All Might loves teaching through doing, so, whatever the subject he is going to impart us tomorrow is going to be practical. And if today was anything to go by, anything practical here has to do with us using our quirks in some fashion. So, I would expect something along the lines of today, but with an All Might flavor to it. So, destructive and more than likely dangerous? Inquired Momo, a teasing smirk appearing on her face as she did so. Yep. Ichako nodded, an excited smile on her face as she threw a few punches to the air. In that case, I can't wait. A dangerous grin appeared on her face as an aura of competitiveness surrounded her body. Izuku and Momo looked at her in shock. Tenya was more vocal, as he gaped at her with sweat trailing down his temple. Uraraka, what is wrong with you? Is it your true personality? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.